long as the colonial office did not need treasury funds, the permanent officials at the colonial office could enjoy maximum control of policy within the territory in their interface between the colonial governor and the colonial secretary. With southern Nigeria yielding annual surplus or surpluses and northern Nigeria producing annual deficits, these officials were protective of the freedom of action they enjoy over southern Nigeria. In London and in northern Nigeria, it was assumed that until the entire country was pacified and a strong government established throughout, a substantial military force maintained at substantial expense would be necessary. The colony itself was unable to generate funds for either its civil government or for a military force. During the years 1899 to 1913, an annual contribution was received from southern Nigeria. This never exceeded 75,000 pounds. Therefore, an annual grant in aid of revenue from the British Treasury, the major source of income for northern Nigeria, was necessary. The funding challenge in northern Nigeria hit crisis point in the 1911-1912 budget, which showed the need for a substantial treasury grant in the sum of 365,000 pounds sterling. With such a level of dependency, it was looking as if the colonial office would have to submit to treasury control. To avoid this, it proposed a scheme of amalgamation of northern Nigeria with southern Nigeria, requiring an annual grant from the treasury of 100,000 pounds for a fixed period of 5 years, on terms that thereafter the colonial office would do all that could be done to secure the financial stability of the amalgamated Nigeria. On 12th October 1912, the scheme was approved. The decision that remained was the long-deferred one of who was to effect the amalgamation. The man making the decision was the colonial secretary, Louis Vernon Acott. Having overseen the amalgamation of Lagos and the Yoruba mainland with the East, with the creation of southern Nigeria in 1906, and implemented a successful economic development program which had yielded annual budget surpluses, Egerton was the obvious choice for the job if the agenda for the amalgamated territory was development on the southern Nigeria model. But this was not the plan. Instead, it was Lugard's model of administration that was decided upon. And the choice of Lugard for the job logically followed. They could not have Lugard's idea without Lugard. Lugard was formally appointed governor of northern and southern Nigeria in May 1912. He left for Nigeria in September for a survey, returned to England in the spring, and presented his amalgamation plan to the colonial office on 9th May 1913. The essence of the plan was as follows. Amalgamated Nigeria was to be divided into northern and southern provinces. The original colony of Lagos, a strip 110 miles long from 4 to 20 miles wide, was detached from the southern province and separately administered. And the Southern Nigeria Legislative Council restricted to Lagos. The Governor General would legislate for the rest of Nigeria with the advice of an executive council composed of officials from his staff. There will be 2 lieutenant governors, one for the northern and one for the southern Nigeria. an administrator for Lagos. Some departments will be fully amalgamated. Others will be supervised by deputy heads with separate establishments in the north and south and come directly under the respective lieutenant governors. The only significant unifying institution will be the governor general, who would be in a strongly authoritarian position, as all financial estimates would emanate from him. Lugard might have been amused by his deification by the Nigerian president, Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, when at the official celebration for the centenary of the amalgamation, he said that, excuse me, I'm going to take a sneeze break. I had to take that. I don't know. Maybe I should actually take a tea break. And we can continue from what Jonathan said. Oh, dear. Anyway, thank you. So let us continue. So good luck, Jonathan. During the celebration of 100 years of amalgamation of Nigeria, said that the amalgamation of Nigeria was not a mistake, but an act of God. The flippancy of Jonathan's remark is rivaled only by the words of the British colonial secretary, Lord Acott, in the run-up to the amalgamation on 1st January 1914. Lord Acott is the man that created Port Harcourt, just so you know, okay? When they were taking the coal from Enugu and they needed a seaport. They needed a seaport to transport the Enugu coal. And then from there, they created administrative residence. Then they created administrative block that later became Port Harcourt, flooded by traders, middlemen, and all of that, and all that. Lord Acott, he wrote on the 1st of January 1914, we have released northern Nigeria from the leading strings of the treasury. The promising and well-conducted youth is now on an allowance of his own and is about to effect an alliance with a southern lady of means. I have issued the special license and Sir Frederick Lugard will perform the ceremony. May the union be fruitful and the couple constant. Do you remember that there is a popular saying from one of these northern parasites that they call the northern leaders? They said the story of Nigeria is that of a poor husband, northern Nigeria, and a rich wife, southern Nigeria, who are forced together to remain as couple, even as much as the husband remained lazy, wasteful, arrogant, and proud. The wife continued to receive different kind of abuse, and the wife is forced to continue to fund the laziness, the unproductiveness of a supposed first husband. The South was not asked if they wanted to marry. The rich wife was not asked if, or let me say, the rich lady of the South was not asked if he was willing to marry the lazy, unproductive northern youth husband. But they did the ceremony anyway. It was a forced marriage, but they prayed that the union will be fruitful. No, it won't. You understand that? Let us continue. Upon Lugard's appointment, I'm gonna make a balance. Upon Lugard's appointment, Egerton left Nigeria Hang on. Why is that so even down? It shouldn't be. Look like small about it. Yeah, you should be seeing more than that. And this is better. Thank you very much, Joe. I know some of you are just waking up to this, okay? It is the reading of A Fatherless People, secret stories of how Nigerians missed the road to the promised land. I don't even know about the promise, but they were promised something. So how did they miss the road? That's what we are reading. Eh? Oh dear, I think I have a jump there. My cue there. Give me a sec. Right. So let's be a bit okay. I found it. So let's put it out. And indeed, if you have something, if you are really like getting on with your morning or your afternoon, it doesn't really matter. Okay, you can listen to this just behind the scene. All right, this is just historical, events that shaped the Nigeria that you have today. And the idea of one Nigeria was never that of the people that are going to be called Nigerians. Okay. But let us continue. Upon Lugard's appointment, Egerton left Nigeria to become governor of British Guiana. Lugard now sought to secure a return to Nigeria on his own terms by reviving his proposal of continuous administration. Harcourt, who considered Lugard indispensable to the Amalgamation project, approved a modified version of the scheme, allowing Lugard to run Nigeria from London for 4 months in each year. As a reward for Harcourt's support, Lugard named the new port on the Bonny River, which Egerton had initiated, Port Harcourt. The impact of Lugard's assumption of responsibility for southern Nigeria was immediate and dramatic. By the time of the handover, Bagham's Nigerian Bitumen Company was just 50 miles away from today's oil field in a search for oil in southern Nigeria. A decision on the company's appeal for more financial support from the government was pending when, in September 1912, Bagham's was killed in a car crash. The death of his company, already financially challenged, followed very quickly afterwards. Sir Walter Egerton, an enthusiastic supporter of economic development, who had actively encouraged and worked with the Nigerian Bitumen Corporation, had left Nigeria. The new man, Sir Frederick Lugard, was more interested in administration than oil. He recommended in May 1913 that no further money be lent and that the company be asked to repay the original loan. Lugard had his own economic development plan for Nigeria and Britain, and he coined the phrase, the dual mandate. To explain it here, the aims of West African administration are comparatively simple. Unconcerned with that large range of subjects which provide material for the domestic legislation of most civilized countries, its problems are confined to two main branches: the treatment of native races, who are centuries behind ourselves in mental evaluation, and the steps by which they may be gradually brought to a higher plane of civilization and progress, and economic development by which these tropical countries may develop a trade which shall benefit our own industrial classes by the production. On the one hand, of the raw materials, rubber, oils, cotton, hides, etc., which form the staples of our own manufactures, and by the absorption in return of our manufactured cottons, hardware, and other goods. He was equally forthright in his explanation of the division of functions in relation to the exploitation of Nigeria's resources. The natural resources taken from the land would be returned as finished articles for the use and comfort of Nigerians. Tropics are the heritage of mankind. And neither, on the one hand, has the suzerain power a right to their exclusive exploitation, nor, on the other hand, have the races which inhabit them a right to deny their bounties to those who need them. The responsibility for adequate development rests on the custodian on behalf of civilization, and not on behalf of civilization alone, for much of this product is returned to the tropics, converted into articles for the use and comfort of his people. These were Lugard's words. Lugard's education policy. By the time Britain declared the Protectorate of Northern Nigeria on 1st January 1900, a steely determination had set in amongst the imperial strategists to atone for the mistakes of the past, which led to the first empire in America being lost to the rebel settlers, and also to a sleeping grip on the second. There was real concern that the model of administration which had been pursued in southern Nigeria over the preceding 50 years, based on Western education and the Christian teachings on the equality of all men, was producing a situation where the empire's hold on southern Nigeria was at risk of being lost to nationalists. Early signs that the virus of nationalism had taken hold among the educated natives had made it necessary to create the offense of sedition in southern Nigeria. So, the government responded to the outburst of political agitation and press criticism in 1908 by passing the Seditious Offences Ordinance in 1909. Articulate Lagosians regarded the act as an intolerable and un-British stifling of criticism. In moving the rejection of the bill in the Legislative Council, the Honorable Shakpara Williams pointed out that the freedom of the press is the great palladium of British liberty. Sedition is a thing incompatible with the character of the Yoruba people and has no place in their constitution. Hypersensitive officials may come tomorrow who will see sedition in every criticism and crime in every mass meeting. Remember, Shakpara is called Honorable Shakpara Williams. You will get to hear more about him as we proceed in this reading. In the same way as Thomas Buxton had made the case for the colonization of what became southern Nigeria in the wake of abolition, another intellectual, Edmund Dean Morrell, was chosen to make the seemingly impossible case for preferring the feudal system of administration in northern Nigeria to the liberal system prevailing in the south. The choice of Morrell was a shrewd one, as he was widely regarded as a friend of Africa. Following his expose on King Leopold of Belgium's atrocities in the Belgian Congo, in his highly acclaimed book, Red robber. Secure in his reputation for liberal thinking on African issues, Morel was able to make the case for the defense and extension of Lugard's system of governance in northern Nigeria with gusto in another book which he published in 1911, Nigeria, Its People and Its Problems, in which he dressed an argument for the defense of the imperial old in the most liberal garment. The central plank of his case was the proper form of education for the native peoples, drawing on the experience of the British Empire in India. So from their book, the predominant characteristics of our educational methods, official and unofficial, in Western Africa, hitherto may be summed up in one word: denationalization. The result is to notoriously unsatisfactory as to need no specific illustration. If readers of Valentine Ashiro's book on India will turn to his chapters on the failure of our educational methods there and substitute West Africa for India, they will be furnished with a replica of the situation on the west coast of Africa. It is not an exact replica, for the reason that while the ties of caste are a deterrent to denationalization, such deterrent is non-existent in West Africa. But there is not one charge that Mr. Shiros brings against the Indian system that could not be equally brought against the West African system. And identical consequences are ensuing. By denationalization, Morel really meant the lack of respect for established order. Both Indian traditional and British colonial, which the extension of education on European lines was encouraging in the beneficiaries. In his assessment, the blame for the emergence of this trend within Nigeria lay squarely with the missionaries and the British colonial administrators in southern Nigeria. So, in quote again, we are barely beginning to realize that the policy, or rather impolicy, of the last half century has been a hideous example of misdirected efforts. And there is hardly an administrator who does not contemplate the development of the educated native problem with the gravest foreboding. The object of the Northern Nigeria administration is to set on foot an educational system throughout the country, which shall save the protectorate from these follies, while at the same time affording the rising generation the intellectual pabulum we are bound to provide, and ultimately laying the basis for a native civil service. The alarm that Morel was sounding over the threat to the imperial old posed by educated natives was not altogether new. As far back as 1862, Henry Townsend, the head of the British mission in Abeokuta, had sounded the same alarm when he engineered the reposting of the missionary colleague who was perceived to be encouraging too much learning. According to Townsend then, he wrote, as the war matter between Abeokuta and Ibadan became complicated and battle shifted from Ijaye to Ijebu country, Townsend engaged in a conflict at home with his colleague, Gottlieb Frederick Boller, who was in charge of the training institution. As a man who saw no value in what he considered too much book learning for Africans, he loathed the academic emphasis in Butler's curriculum. Townsend, like many CMS missionaries in West Africa in the mid-19th century, believed that too much book learning only fans the vanities of African young people. They were of the view that basic training as evangelists and scripture readers was all they needed. In reality, part of their unstated fear was that they would not be able to keep well-educated converts forever under their thumb as mission agents. That the concern which were being voiced about the educated natives were not entirely misplaced became clear within church politics after Henry Townsend had tried to block the ordination of Ajayi Crowther as the first African bishop. Members of the African clergy reacted by declaring their independence of the Anglican Church and establishing the native church. The irony was that it was Townsend himself who had made the most telling contribution to the spread of education amongst the Yoruba generally, and to the political strength of the Egba in particular. In 1859, drawing upon his experience as a member of a printing family, he had established the first newspaper in the land, Iwe Iroyin. He had intended it as a propaganda instrument to aid the Egba in their war against Ibadan. But this head start has ensured the predominance of the southern media till today, especially in the southwest. The concern that the Western education was corroding the grip on southern Nigeria drove Lugard and Morel to resolve to insulate the North from the virus by declaring Western education for the native in northern Nigeria to be a sin. In modern parlance, Boko Haram. Book is Haram. That is the meaning of Boko. Boko means book. Haram means sin. Lugard and the Fulani oligarch, because they wanted to save the northern Nigeria from the virus of education, enlightenment, they decided to start promoting the ideology of book is Haram. Boko Haram. This was as far back as 1913. Are you listening? Yeah. Let us continue. According to them, let us render wise by experience elsewhere. Set our faces like flames against the Europeanizing of northern Nigeria. There will be education, but it will be restricted to intellectual development for the sons of the emirs. Education for the masses will be limited to technical education. Listen to this. It is at Nasarawa, a beautifully situated and healthy spot, a few miles outside Kano, close by the emir's country residence, that the first government schools have been started. They consist at present of the Malami School, or technical school with carpenters, blacksmiths, leather workers, and agricultural classes. The creation of a primary and secondary school will follow as soon as the work is sufficiently advanced. Divorced from the agenda of the perpetuation of the imperial old. The case which Morel made for his education plan for northern Nigeria was powerful, calling for a focus on the local and practical rather than the international and enlightening. Give me a sec. I think I have a bit of an interruption out there Or yeah, I'm going to take you onto it. Don't worry. But I'm going to also save ourselves from the distraction of this. Okay, so bear with me, ladies and gentlemen. Just one sec, right?
Ayégún làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò. Ayégún làwa mọ̀ làmọ̀ tó dòdòdò. Ayégún ti dé o, ọ̀rẹ́ ara yìí. Lórí Facebook, lórí YouTube.